Hey, warehouse people. So we had some really cool stuff lined up for this episode, but as you can see, it didn't end up that way.
It ended up not being cool.
Myself and all of our rock stars also forgot that it's a holiday week until about yesterday, and everybody was like, "Oh, I forgot. I can't. Let's do it next week." So we didn't have a show. So anyway, we were planning on doing this anyway, and I kind of hate it because it seems kind of vain, but like I guess it's relevant. So we're just going to talk. I was a director of the warehouse for 5, 6 years, something like that. I guess I should have looked it up. I thought about that in the shower and then I forgot to do it. I didn't look it up, but take my word for it. I was a director at some point. And so we thought we would just discuss that. So Chase, the awesome, we're just gonna have a discussion.
I'm going to interview someone today, so that'll be a lot of
Maybe.
fun. Yes, we'll get through this okay. I think what we do need to come up with is to kind of weed out who was and wasn't a director. I've been, since doing some research, I've stumbled upon some people that I've never heard the names of, but could also possibly be.
Well, it was Tim Cook, myself, Mike Williford, and Brian Harp. And so, but we did have a lot of other people on staff that were absolutely key to the operation,
right.
And stuff, which we'll probably interview at some point down the line. But yeah, I was the second director of the warehouse, so it was already going when I came along to it.
And is this like how like people are with Star Wars? How like the new ones aren't like the original ones? So if you and Tim are the only original because you guys are both named Tim.
Well, to be completely honest, like Tim. I mean, I did some decent shows, but Tim did the one. If you ask people like what, with the notable exception of Me Without You, if you ask people like what was your most memorable shows at the warehouse, usually they're going to talk about stuff that Tim Cook put on, because he caught everybody on the way up. I mean, it was
right.
MXPX and Supertone's third day. I mean, all these bands that would go on to be really big, POD, things like that. So yeah, Tim's probably more interesting, but he's in San Diego right now. So
we'll get him on the show. We'll get him on the show. So Tim, the first thing, and I asked about it yesterday, was why is the warehouse spelled the warehouse that way?
I don't really know. Again, I came onto it and it was like, oh yeah. And at the time, this was before the internet and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And well, actually it was at the very beginning of it when, before everybody had their own email and things of that nature. And it actually kind of became an issue because like people would think that it was spelled like where, the regular way. And so they'd be searching for us and couldn't find it.
Right. So it was like a Google, like when you're trying to find a Google business now?
Yeah, pretty much. And so, but regardless, that's what it was. So that's what we're going with.
Well, I even made the mistake when I sent the
warehouse.
Yes. Yeah, I sent over the first stuff to him to come up with a design, and I had it WARE.
I remember one time, and I don't know why I remember this, like when the internet did come in, and like message boards and stuff was big. We'd always have like at the band tournament, there'd always be somebody. I mean, watch American Idol. People don't like it when they don't get to go on, so that would happen. And I remember this guy was on the internet like writing crappy stuff about us, and I'll never forget it. He goes, it's just a rundown old warehouse anyway, and he spelled it WHERE, and I just remember being like, oh, that's just unfortunate, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it could be for him, but I mean, for you guys, it was brand awareness that he went with that spelling. I think that
it was his rage. He couldn't see through his rage.
Yes, he couldn't just take a second to calm down on the.
There's my product placement.
Right? Yes.
Oh, Walmart's hiring.
I think it's
or McDonald's. Sorry.
Man.
God, I'm out of it.
Now we're 4 minutes in, and we're already going to be censored on Facebook. So the Battle of the Bands, your band tournament that you guys had, was a fairly big thing. Like, what were some of the notable bands that you can say came through the warehouse bands that people would probably remember or even still know today?
Probably, well, I mean, there's several answers to that. Probably, and it's going to be weird because you will not have heard of this band, but I tell you why they're of interest, you're going to get it. Probably Mind Rage. Mind Rage was a band that was just tremendous, like sort of industrial metal kind of thing. Trio, 3 guys, and their guitar player went on to be the guitar player and primary songwriter.
Yes,
they're coming for us. They heard what's happening. Became the primary songwriter in Evanescence.
Oh, cool.
So John LeComp was the singer, guitar player in Mind Rage.
So he is the
And-
reason that they were labeled a Christian band.
Well, him and Rocky, because Rocky. Okay, so the drummer in Evanescence is the guitar player in Living Sacrifice.
Okay.
So Mind Rage was from Arkansas.
Right.
So that's where the connection with Sacrifice and all that came
Okay.
from. And so those guys didn't break up either. Well, I guess Mind Rage broke up, but Sacrifice obviously didn't. And so they went on and did Evanescence and got ginormous and all that kind of stuff. And I was always kind of, people were like, oh, whatever the singer's name is. I guess a lot of people don't like her, and people were always talking shit and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't know them. I honestly probably wouldn't buy an Evanescence record, but like I know the drummer and the guitar player, and they're awesome.
Right. But see, I remember the Evanescence album, that first one that came out. They had a song with 12 Stones or whatever, and you could buy it at Mardell.
Yeah. Well, and I think 12 Stones was I use the word legit, but I mean they were a professed Christian,
right?
I think, but yeah, we never had those guys. Although, yeah, but back to your earlier question, so probably Mind Rage would be what everybody would know the people from. But I mean the ones that we had that we were so proud of, Fillmore, obviously, Days Vale came out of the band term, Agony Scene. Oh my gosh, several others, and I'm drawing a complete Sub 7. Yeah, great guys.
Sub 7 yesterday.
I was at their video shoot, although I wasn't cool enough to get in the video, but I was present when that was going on.
Right. Sub 7 was great. I mean, there was a lot of good bands that were coming out in that.
Maybe we ought to do like a whole episode about the band, because there were so many great anecdotes and so much good stuff. Like Slamcat, who you probably haven't heard of, but they were one of them that really sticks out in my mind as being just great, great band, great everything. A lot of the bands that really didn't make a huge splash. There was a band that I've always wondered about called the Bloodbought Warriors, because I guess that's more like street sound.
Yeah.
But like they were, like what you would think. I mean, a total like Cold Chamber kind of, nu metal, whatever.
Right.
But God, what a bunch of great. I mean, they were so cool, and I was just so into them. And again, probably wouldn't buy their record, but like I just remember they were, a lot of times when you do band tournaments, I guess it's just human nature, but like, it's a competition. I mean, so a lot of the bands would be like, screw those guys, we're better, kind of stuff. Not the Bloodbought Warriors. They just were they were buying shirts and they were dancing and slamming to everybody, and I was just like, man, these guys, I like these guys. But then of course after the band tournament, I never heard of them again. So well, see, I don't know what became of them.
And you get those band tournaments that happen, and some of those bands, I know, like I remember when Pop-Up Video was popular. And they had Lips of an Angel by Hinder.
Ooh.
And they were like, their home state had a band tournament and they didn't win it, and now look at them. Was there anybody that you can remember that didn't?
Yeah, I don't think Morning September won, and they're tremendous. I worked with them. I love them. Matter of fact, I hung out with Zach the other day. Love that band, did great. And actually I mentioned Days Vale. I don't know if they won either, and they were great. We always had somebody get signed out of it, and so that was kind of the way that our marketing deal was. That every year we've had record deals come out of this,
right?
And and I say this humbly, but like we did a pretty good job of picking. If you were in a Christian band in the '90s, we would put you in front of people that would. I mean, we had Tooth and Nail every year. We had Take Hold, Face Down, HM Magazine, I mean, everybody in this. We had people from CCM. We had like booking agencies, PR. I mean, it was good. And so every year we'd have bands get signed out of it. And so that was really. It wasn't really about who won, although it was always kind of weird because who won wouldn't necessarily be who was going to do the best. But yeah, we were always and I was terrified every year. I'm like, oh, nobody's going to get signed and we're going to lose our stuff.
Yeah, you're not going to have that.
Yeah, but it ended up okay. And yeah, we even had somebody signed to Tooth and Nail. It wasn't Sub 7. It was, I can't think of the name. Anyway.
So you took over in what year?
Yeah, I knew you were going to, you know what? I'm going to look that up while we're talking about it, because I can find this out. First show, I can tell you this, the first show I did was Project 86, Blindside, and somebody also I can't even remember.
And those are names of bands that you would never think to come to a town of. How big was
Oh yeah.
How big was Bartlesville at the time?
Oh, it's the same as it is now. It's about 35,000.
Right.
But what's kind of funny about that though is that if you on paper, people were always like, why are all these cool bands in Bartlesville? Like, what is it? Like, it doesn't even make sense.
Right.
But if you really like kind of do the math, it makes total sense. Because I mean, we're in Buckle on the Bible Belt. I mean, if there's anybody at that time that was going to be looking for kind of, obscure, off the beaten path kind of thing, it would be in Oklahoma. So, I mean, we really were something that, it really could only exist here. And the town was actually kind of conducive to it too, because like they didn't really, how do I say this nicely? I think they didn't realize what we were doing.
Right.
And so like the people in Bartlesville for the most part left us alone.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of big towns and stuff like that, and ultimately, in my opinion, what really was the end of the warehouse, it was a fire code thing. Really? So I say that, yeah. But okay, now I've got this pulled up. So the first show that I did was the first show I ever came to was October 5th, 1996, Living Sacrifice in POD.
Okay.
Changed my life. The first show that I did. If you guys are interested, go on to the Legendary Warehouse Facebook page, and we've got a list of all the shows.
And that's a good time while he's looking too. Check out Warehouse Pod. It's on all of the socials. You can find everything that you need to about the Warehouse Podcast, Instagram, Twitter, merch. If I can get this guy to approve some things. So this is kind of becoming a relevant brand again. And that's the thing that's cool about it is, while I was planning...
Like CBGBs.
Right, it's Christian CBGB. When I was planning Reformation Fest, there was a ton of people that were asking, is this going to be the start of the warehouse again?
That's a popular, I mean, there's not a month goes by that somebody doesn't say something. And there's been peaks and valleys with, I mean, there were times where I was like, hell no, there's not going to be any more. But, now I'm kind of like, hey, it's fun. Okay, so I couldn't find the actual show that was my first one, but it would have been around 01 or 02.
01 or 02?
Yeah, something like that.
So you were a fan for 5 years and then became the director.
Oh my gosh, the warehouse just became my life. It was funny. So I'll just tell you the whole story about this. So I am from here, and not only am I from Bartlesville, I'm not even from the city of Bartlesville. I'm from like out in the country.
Ooh.
And the area, the area that I'm from is actually called Hog Shooter.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So like if it's funny, like I always kid people, like I know I come off really city and cosmopolitan, but I'm from Hog Shooter. So my first kindergarten class we were the big class at my school, and we had 24 kids.
Right, that's a big class.
Well, I'm from it was huge for Hogshire, but that's my background, and I grew up next door to the church. My parents, last week were at the same church, and this week are going to be at the. I mean, we had to go constantly, and I always kid that it just didn't take with me. Like I just wasn't into it.
Yeah.
And many years later, I kind of bottomed out, went through a bunch of stuff, and came back to the faith. Came back home. I was living in Maine. I'd gotten just about as far in the continental United States as you could from Oklahoma, and so come back home, and I got saved, and I'm all excited about everything, and I'm going to new start and all this kind of stuff. So I did what we in the Christian industry refer to as the Christian rock throwaway, which it played out exactly like how it always plays out. It's like, you get saved and you're like, why I can't listen to Marilyn Manson?
No,
and I got rid of all my CDs or all my tapes even. I had a bunch of, that's how long ago it was. And of course, felt good about it for a month, and then proceeded to spend the rest of my life buying back the ones that I did. But anyway,
the original that you had.
So I did that, and I remember distinctly thinking, Again, I grew up in the church, and like I thought all of it sucked. Like I grew up in the not that, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not. I like her. I'm not dogging it, but like I grew up in the era of like Amy Grant and Dallas Holm and stuff like that. And like at the time, I'm listening to like Motley Crue and Jane's Addiction and stuff, and like
no fun.
Yeah, I was kind of like, this isn't working for me. So I was in. There used to be a Christian bookstore in the mall.
Ruth's.
No, it was before that. I think it was maybe Living Word or something like that. But I realize everybody can say that everywhere, or used to be in the 80s. The Christian bookstore in the mall. But so I was in there looking for music and not finding anything. And again, I'm certainly not dogging any of these bands, but it was very big on, like, at the time, it was all like DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline and I don't know, White Cross and stuff like that, which again wasn't really resounding with me. So I'm asking just random people.
Yeah.
They come into the store like, do you know of any like cool Christian rock? And half of them were like, well, we do. Here's the new Audio Adrenaline, and I'm like, yeah, it's not. But so one time I asked this guy, and he goes,
the most crime-filled day.
I know, that's how we roll.
Yeah, to record.
Actually, I got a funny story about that with POD and the police. It was funny, but anyway, I'll tell you later. But I'm just asking random people, like, do you know of any cool Christian rock? And this one guy goes, and it was funny because, you find something you lost in the last place you look. It was like that. It was like, this was the last guy I asked that because he had the right answer. And he goes, well, there's nothing good in here. And he was right. And he was like, there's nothing good in here, but there's this place called the Warehouse, and there's a show tonight, and you should go to that. And I was like, Warehouse, what? And it kind of boggles my mind that he knew all this. I mean, knew the address and everything. And he was like, go tonight, and he gave me the address. And I was like, well, who's playing? And I'll never forget it. He goes, I don't know, but it'll be cool. Just go. It'll be good. And Chase, I don't know why, but like I went. I mean, I went not knowing anything. I mean, like all I knew was that like there's good Christian rock and it's here.
Right.
Go there. And so I did, and I show up, and you've been over there. I mean, hopefully all you guys are listening have either seen a picture, been there, or seen a picture of it. But the Warehouse was in a pretty nondescript area. I mean, it was pretty, not good.
Was the water plant there yet? Or was,
it was. Okay. Yeah. And so, and if you went like 100 feet outside it, you could smell the nasty whatever.
Yeah.
But so, again, not good. So I show up, and like I said, turns out it's these bands that I'd never heard of called Living Sacrifice and POD. And Tim used to do all this kind of in-joke kind of stuff. And so I go, and I didn't even know it was the right place. I mean, it didn't. Now, we eventually painted it red. You could tell the Warehouse, like it looked like this is the place.
Yeah.
But at the time, it wasn't like that. I mean, it was just a cinder block garage door thing. And I mean, I was kind of like, surely this isn't it. And there was like 3 or 4 kids lined up at the door. And I remember they had like wallet chains. And so I was kind of like, oh, this must be.
The wallet chain is the sign.
So at that point, I'd been, and you're going to hear this a lot in this podcast, people, I'd been in the general market a lot. So like, I'm coming at this from, it seemed like Suicidal, Metallica, and, bands like that.
Yeah.
And like, so I was really kind of in that headspace, even though I was like, I'm a Christian now and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
My mind was really like, this ain't going to impress me. I mean, I figured this was like, Amy Grant with a little bit of distortion.
Right.
And so I go get in line, and the whole time, I mean, I'm asking it like, is this the Warehouse? Kind of thing. And so it's important to note, Chase, that the parking lot there was kind of long. Like there were several warehouses next to us. And so down at the end of the parking lot, there was these terrifying looking guys. And I remember thinking that, like, because of the area we were in, I was kind of like, well, they must live around, like the outside, like the outsiders or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was kind of like, I don't want to mess with them. And they're playing football like down at the other end of the thing. And so I'm standing there with these wallet chain guys, and like, go see the show. It's going to be cool. I'm too cool for this, but I'm going to go anyway, kind of thing. Well, so I hear them down there, and it's like, go out kind of thing. And so everybody, runs, and one of them's got the ball, and he's, looking for the pass. And I'm like, oh God, don't let him come here. Don't let him come over here. And sure enough, he throws the long bomb, and like, I think it was Wub, if I remember correctly, but like catches the ball and then just runs into all of it, like all four of us, me and the wallet chain guys.
Yeah.
And what do you do when some gangster looking guy, it's just like, oh yeah, it's okay, it's all right. Dude, it was POD, and I didn't know it. And so like, they finally open the doors and we go in, and again, there's 10 or 15 people, and like, I go in and it's like the Wizard of Oz, when she comes out and it's like color.
Yeah.
Like, it was like that, man. Like, I walk in and there's this mural and like all the merch and stuff, and it was legit. I mean, it wasn't like, a shitty Christian version of something. It was like, it was good. And so like, I like, oh, okay, yeah, I could get with this. All right. And so I'm, it starts filling up and all this, and I'm talking to people, and now I'm a Christian, so I'm kind of like, what's the Lord done in your life?
Oh man, how's your walk?
Yeah, and so, but like, completely feeling like just absolutely validated, because these weren't people, and again, I'm not dogging them, but like, they weren't people like at my parents' church that they didn't get it. I mean, like, if I was like, do you hear that new Rage record? They would, and they'd have an opinion and could talk about it and stuff like that. So I immediately was like, wow. And, I just said that was POD playing football. Well, in the story, I didn't know that yet. So I'm walking around, I'm looking at all this merch and stuff. And come time for the show, and by then there's probably 100 people, maybe 100, 150 possibly. So it was a decent crowd. And lights went down, and I'm all like, oh, this could be cool. This could actually be really good. And Tim Cook, who I didn't know at the time, was up there, and he introduces them. And POD at the time, they were so, I don't know what the word is, like, just real. I mean, they were absolutely unpolished, absolutely street. I mean, just all that. And they freaking jumped up on the stage. Like, they didn't even go around the back to get on stage. Like, they were playing ball, and they came in and hopped up on the stage from the front. I mean, they climbed up from the front, like, through the crowd.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, that's those football guys. Oh my God.
Just took you out.
And then I'm like, God, I'm in over my head. I thought these guys are the real, good Lord. And they used to open with this, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a song, but it wasn't like what you would know as a song. It was more like an intro. Like an intro. Yeah. And it was like, when we come, the wicked run.
Right.
And like, they, say that a couple of times, and the crowd gets it. And then like, everybody's singing along, I know who these guys were. And I'm like, when we come, the wicked. and like, they freaking killed it, dude. I mean, to this day, one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. I mean, if you ever saw Sonny's testimony about his mom dying, I'm crying, and like, here, those people that I didn't know, like, hugging and stuff, and like, and they just crushed it. And then freaking Sacrifice comes on. POD was opening. Sacrifice comes on, and it was right when Reborn had come out.
Okay.
And I was just like, that was amazing. I mean, like, that was one of the greatest bands I ever saw, POD. I'm like, what are these guys gonna do? And they got up and opened with Reborn Empowered, which first time I ever heard it in my life was live, standing like 5 feet away from Bruce when they did it. And I mean, crowds going insane, and it changed my life, dude. And I mean, I immediately was like, who's in charge here? And somebody says Tim, and I'm kind of like, I want to work, I want to do this, and whatever you need, I want to do. And he was like, well, we need volunteers, and I was like, then sign me up. That's what's happening. And at the time, and it's really kind of funny. So I was working at Dillard's.
Ooh.
I know. And so like, I'd have to go to work like in, suit and junk, and then I'm doing like all this wallet chain.
Yeah, hang out with wallet chains.
Yeah, and like, and and so I remember he was like, well, you got to be flexible on the weekends. And I was like, I got it. I can do it. And so like, I remember like taking the schedule at the warehouse and going into work and being like, I need off here, 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 here. And like, that was it. And I mean, I just became that guy that like whatever Tim needed, I was gonna do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if he called me at 3 a.m. and was like, "Hey, go sweep the ware," I'd have done it. I mean, I just wanted to be a part of that. I mean, it just was life changing.
Right.
So that went on for a while, and Chase, it was. I mean, when you look at like kind of the heyday of that stuff, we were right in the middle of the. I mean, if you picked up an HM magazine or one of the magazines that would have covered what we were doing, we were having every one of the band. I mean, all of them. I mean, for Stavesacre and Supertones and MXPX and everybody that was relevant in our scene we had.
Yeah.
And so here I come into this, and not only was I not like the elder statesman that like, well, this isn't going to be as good as Metallica. Like, hell, it was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, it's kind of funny with my kids. Like, I almost consider that kind of like lost time almost, because I was the years that we were doing that, like, I just didn't care about anything else. I mean, there's all these great, like, System of a Down and Decemberists and stuff like that, like that were out during that time. I wasn't even aware of them. I didn't care. All I cared about was like our scene and our people. And, and luckily there was a lot of other people that felt the same way. And it was legendary. I mean, some of those shows, I mean, like the Tooth and Nail weekends, I mean, where Roadside Monument would play, or freaking Plank Eye, or I mean, these were awesome shows. Yeah. And like we go hang out with them. I mean, it wasn't. And again, I'm not dogging these things because I like it. This. I went and saw Kiss.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago.
Right.
And yeah, man. Yeah. So I've been to arena shows. Where you get roughed up if you try and, but these guys, like, they'd sell their own merch. Like, you could hang out with Scott Stoletta, you know what I mean? Like, I got a picture of me and Sonny Sandoval from POD in front of their van. They used to have this old crappy 70s conversion van,
as most bands in that time had.
Oh yeah, and with a here's what it looked like. There was usually some kind of crappy secondhand van with a trailer, and the trailer was usually new, and then there'd be stickers all over the back of the trailer.
Yep. That was that. I mean, even I'm a lot younger than Tim, actually. And so when I'm
really immature though.
Yes, that's what makes this work. Is I was in Durant, and we had a thing called Haggard Hall.
Yeah.
And then First Baptist Church Denison had a basement. And so you could do like a Friday night at Haggard Hall, and then all those people that liked you could go watch at First Baptist Denison. But we heard from bands that weren't just local, like high school bands or college kids or whatever. They were on their way to Bartlesville.
Yeah.
Like they would play at the Door in Dallas.
Yeah.
And then they would, every once in a while, we would just somehow luckily get one of these bands to say, yeah, we'll play. Haggard Hall was a 4-H hall at the Bryan County Fair.
What could go wrong?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you walk in and you have just the bathrooms, and then you're out into a pig farm, basically. A hall thing. And so that was what we did. And so every once in a while we would get bands that were on their way to the warehouse in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so that was it kind of became this kind of mythical beast almost of, this is where all of these bands are playing. And I'm like, Bartlesville. I think I went there when I was little, and we went and looked at Buffalo. Like,
what's this Mecca they're talking about?
Yeah, and that's what everybody. Oh man, if you want to do something, you got to play the warehouse. And I always, because you hear the exaggerations from bands, like bands are a lot like fishermen. Like the size of the crowd is always the size of a fish, and it's always like, dude, we played to 500 kids, but now I see video, and so when did that happen? Because from the sounds of it, Living Sacrifice POD had a couple hundred kids.
Yeah.
You guys got to where you were in.
We of course, like everything else with the warehouse, there wasn't anything official really
Right.
because
There's
we
no
were
official
well,
calendars.
but we at one of the biggest show I can remember was at a Tooth and Nail weekend, and they were good because the first Tooth and Nail weekend ever was held at the warehouse, and it was really because Tim had taken. They used to tour them, which was awesome. Chase. I mean, because when you could go and it would be the full lineup. Like you wanted to see everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like, I remember one of the first punk shows I went to, there was MXPX, Value Pack, and God, who was the other one? It was 90 Pound Wuss.
Okay.
And so it was like everybody, you knew all the, I mean, it was great. And frankly, and I don't know, we're going to get into this part of it, but like from a Christian angle, it was safe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you knew what you were getting when you'd come to something like that.
Right.
But at the same time, it wouldn't be something that you would go down to your church to see. I mean, it was like we would have stuff that, I know it sounds really minor now, but I mean, like, guys take their shirts off and play or whatever, or kids are stage diving or throwing beach balls or stuff that you do at a concert, and like we did that. I mean, they couldn't do it in these other things. Now, what'd you ask? You were saying when was it?
Yeah, when was like the big heyday for it?
Well, that particular lineup, if I remember correctly, it was I think the Supertones was headlining, and I know Goaty Hook and Roadside, Upside Down Room, Staysacre, probably Living Sacrifice. But I remember we opened up the garage door, and the crowd spilled out, like filled up the whole warehouse and went out onto the parking lot. And we actually had to make a perimeter, which of course we didn't have like sawhorses.
You didn't have like the legit setup?
Yeah, so we took like folding tables and put it around, and I think we had some poor, like probably my wife or Tim's wife or somebody was sitting there taking tickets and trying to hold back the don't go in there.
Tooth and Nail
on honor.
Yeah. Tooth and Nail weekends was a big, I mean, they were big things.
Well, I would guess there was over 1,000 probably. And like, so, I mean, I've had estimates of it at like 1,200, which, back to the fire marshal thing, if we actually did that, because I don't think they knew what we were doing. And so like, we'd never actually been rated for like, you can only have so and so many people in here. So I would guess now it would probably be like 400 maybe. And so we were,
three times.
Yeah. Well, but when you're a kid and you're going to shows like that, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but like it's more exciting when it's just this side of a riot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when people are, it's just crazy. I mean, like the pit's going nuts and kids are crowd surfing and jumping. I mean, famously, and Tim Cook can tell you this story better than me, obviously, because he was there and I wasn't. But the first show that was actually in the warehouse was Crucified, which is legendary band, legendary show. And they famously, again, back to the fire marshal thing, fire marshal came in. And strangely, I think after they did this, like they never came back after that. But like they came in and there wasn't a back door. There wasn't a rear exit to it.
Okay.
Which frankly, I always thought was funny because it's like, well, there's a garage door. I mean, it's like if you really have to evacuate, it doesn't take much. I mean, you just open the garage door and everybody's out. But fire marshal comes in and says, hey, there's no, you don't have a fire exit. You can't do the show. This is like the day before the show. You can't do the show until you have and so I think they thought, well, I guess, put the kibosh on that. Right. So not to be deterred, Tim and a couple of other staff guys at the last minute, no joke, went and rented a jackhammer and literally jackhammered through the wall. I mean, wow. I can show you where the door is now. And so, and if I understand correctly, it wasn't even a full door size. Like it was only like that, like so big enough for like people to get out. Yeah. And so, well, and not like in a square. I mean, it was like a ragged hole. Well, a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds.
Like the hole of a tomb?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, well, that would come up later with Savior Machine.
Oh.
I mean, we did do some goth, so there was some. Yeah. But anyway, so had the show, and according to Tim, he said that there was a hole in the side of the building that I guess somebody was guarding, and a pile of rubble. Like they didn't even get the stuff moved out. And for some reason, because I think it was before they had really fixed up the warehouse. I mean, they just got the facility or the building, and it wasn't like what it would eventually become. So it was a lot more, it was still kind of a warehouse and not a rock venue.
Kind of had them.
Well, for some reason, I guess there was a rope, like the ceiling had all these crazy girders and stuff, and it was hanging from that. And I guess Mark Solomon, just during the show, he's swinging out over the crowd, like,
like swinging off of a tire.
United by Christ, like over the top of, I mean, and like kids are going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And like, so, I mean, stuff like that actually kind of added to it. That, like, it adds to the mythos of, I mean, I saw a show and, this happened, this guy's crazy, oh my God.
And it's happening here, and then Tim's got POD, he's managing POD.
Yeah, he actually managed a band called Dig Jesus and went on to Grandma Train, which they played the Warehouse bunch too. But eventually kind of settled in with POD because, we all know that story. I mean, they got gigantic, and that was how I came into the picture. And actually, it's kind of funny. I was so into it. Chase, that's a whole story into itself. I mean, whenever POD took off, everybody wants to be, you want to know Dave Grohl. You know what I mean? You want to I don't know, you want to have that laminate like Wayne's World where like I'm backstage.
Right.
We're going to do that. And so I just been wannabe for everything. And so when POD started happening, it was like, here's something that, friends of mine this is everything that they're on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
They were on MTV. And I remember Tim calling me when Southtown premiered, and he was like, dude, it's going to be on MTV. And I just couldn't even believe it. And no way. I mean, we've been hoping for that, just the whole everything. And I do remember this. I was like, when are they going to start? And he was like, it was some random number. It was like at 3:47 p.m. on Wednesday or something. And so I was like, really? Like they book it that? Like I didn't know that it was that.
They booked the time slot.
And so, of course, we're telling everybody, oh my God, tune in. POD is going to be on, and they were. And like if you watch that video, they're all wearing Scene shirts, like Sonny's wearing a Project shirt and like wearing like Zayo and Blindside, and so it really felt like they just took the whole scene with I'm there with I'm not, but I feel like this is us.
It's more of a family film.
Well, so when POD started taking off, and everything was bigger and better than the last. I mean, every time I talked to Tim, it was better than the last time, and these guys. Sonny famously, was it Sonny? No, it wasn't Sonny. I think it was Marcos, I think. One of them was homeless. He was living in his car, like when they signed the deal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that this is a band that it wasn't like they were the most likely to succeed. It was like they were the least likely to succeed. And so they went from being like on the littlest, most unheard of label in the whole Christian scene to being the major label. They went from being nothing to being everything,
right?
And to be with them when that was going on, it just
and that was the cool thing about them is they're still that because we went, what was it, the 1st of October when they did the satellite stop at the Tulsa State Fair, and we were talking to them, and then Tim has to be in bed by 9:30. So Tim left early and left Courtney and I.
No excuses.
Right. And the legendary Tim Otley was there as well.
Yeah, we'll talk to him later on it.
But he was there, and they actually talked about the warehouse. I just remember them saying, is this whose first time is it CPOD? How many of you guys have been lifers? How many of you saw us in a little place called the Warehouse, a little north of here? And I was like, wow, like they're people that still remember that time.
Dude, it was really funny. They were like, honestly, and I don't say this like hyperbole, but you know how like Jesus picked up people wherever like it just grew and grew, and POD was like that. Like I never saw a band that I read one time that like every band that you see that's out there, Korn, doesn't matter who, Green Day, they were at one time the biggest band in their scene.
Right.
Like they were, wherever they come from, You know, I mean, that's what they are. And like POD was like that. I mean, it was like every time you saw them, they picked people up. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, I remember going like we drove to Arkansas one time to see. I saw them Guts put them on at a
Yeah.
they used to have a flatbed trailer that like unfolded and they called it Rolling Thunder.
Yes.
And like you could just take it places and have a show. And POD played at that, and they had like a cow tank like next to. I mean, I'm not making light of people getting baptized, but they had it like here's the stage, and POD is doing what they do, and there's a cow tank,
Yeah,
and they're baptizing people like during the show, and like, well, and people are getting into it, you know,
right,
so they're like coming out of the mosh pit, like, oh, we got baptized, but I mean, at that before POD really took off, it was like they were like to see them, they would become your favorite band.
right.
I mean, because they were just so legit on. I mean, and then watching like the world discover that. Like I remember, these names mean nothing now, but Carson Daly, who used to be was it Dial MTV, whatever.
He was TRL. Now he's he's the voice.
That's it.
Now he's the host of The Voice.
Well, I remember him being like, they made a big deal. He was like, POD is my favorite band. Like, these are my favorite bunch of guys. I want to have them on all the time. And I remember being like, you know, I get that. Like, I understand. Like, I don't know people like that. You know, you and I have been sitting here joking about Hog Shooter and stuff.
Yeah.
Those guys are real gangsters. I mean, they're not now, obviously, but I mean, they were. And like, I don't know people like that.
Right.
And if I do, I'm usually running the other direction. And like, these guys took me into their fold. I mean, we said we could go to Denny's. I went one time. We had Rescue Fest, and that was the label that they were on, and it was POD, Nail Promise, Dirt, a couple other. I don't remember. I think actually Mind Rage might have played. I don't remember who the other bands were, but it was like, oh, No Innocent Victim, who I love, and they all came to Bartlesville. So here's this, you know, just motley crew of hardcore, you know, tattooed, scary looking guys,
Right.
and we all went to Denny's afterwards. You want to talk about an experience walking into a Denny's in Bartlesville, Oklahoma at probably 1 a.m. with POD and NIV and all these. I mean, it was like on Gunsmoke, you know, where the music,
yep,
and everybody stops.
You're in the wrong spot.
But then you know what? Nobody said nothing.
No.
I mean, it was so. I mean, I was kind of like, yeah, go ahead, mouth off to these guys. But
that's.
Sorry, I got sidetracked.
No, that's the crazy thing about, you know, like POD is probably like when we were doing the Reformation Fest planning and things, that was one of the bands that people were like, hey, you ought to bring them back. Like there is some people.
Dude, I still go. I love them. Well, if they're playing tomorrow, I'd go see them.
No, and I would too. I think they're great, but there is kind of this hometown feel, even though they're from San Diego. Like there's people here that consider them like,
oh, we claim them for sure.
Yeah, like this is where they took off. This is where things started happening for them.
Well, so I'll tell you that story that I started to tell was kind of about the police. So we had been, I think it may have been like when they were about to take off, because like they put out they got signed and they put out the Warriors EP, which wasn't, I mean, it was just kind of to whet the appetite before Southtown. And I think, if I remember right, they were on the Warriors tour, I think. But so they were at the warehouse, and it's just chaos. I mean, people are everywhere and everybody's excited. And our dear friend Tracy Thompson, who we probably ought to have on here, we affectionately call him Crazy Tracy. He was a guy from the scene that just, there's always a guy in every scene.
He was at the POD show.
Yeah,
probably,
okay. Yeah. Tracy, I love him. And he, anyway, Tracy was like from Boston or something. And so he'd seen like, you know, he'd seen like Agnostic Front, Hate, you know, anybody that was big, Tracy had seen. And so Tracy's pretty legit, you know, I mean, he's the real deal. And so we had been talking with POD, joking with POD the whole time about how, you know, you guys are in Southtown and all that, but we hard here. We're hard too. And I remember telling him that. And so it kind of became a running joke throughout the day that like, yeah, we hard Bartlesville. And so we're standing, it's me and Tim Cook and Love and somebody, I don't remember who else it was. I don't think it was somebody from the band. I think Love was the only one. And and so we're standing there kind of talking about this, about, like, so you guys do this gang stuff and all that. And so right as we're having this conversation, Tracy comes running up, and literally running up, and he's like, somebody just stole my car. Oh my God. And he's upset,
Yeah.
and I'll never forget it. I was like, oh my God, somebody stole. Because the first thing I thought was like, somebody stole Tracy's car. And so, Tim would have been the one that, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
And so, oh my God, somebody stole my car. And there's this moment, we're like, and just silence. And then Tim looks at Love and he goes, see, I told you we were hard. and so Tracy's like, what? Like, my car? And so we're all laughing, and I'll never forget it. Love goes, they do I can't do it, but they can do like gang.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, Beeville. He did like a B, and he was like, Beeville. And again, Tracy's not getting it. He was like, you guys,
my car.
And so, but the irony, and I don't know if Love ever, if I was Tim, I wouldn't have told him this, but like, I don't know if Tim ever told Love, but the irony was that it didn't get stolen, it got towed. Like, he parked in the wrong place and it got towed.
Bartlesville, that's how hard they are, man. That's what they do.
But yeah, and so, but anyway, Tracy got his car back, and Love, I'm sure, thought we were hard.
Yeah, so stolen cars in the 74003, right?
And then they played, and it was incredible. I mean, they just kept getting better, and just
POD was the first. Well, it was in a set of things that I got. Was the first thing I ever got from Amazon. Was the Satellite album and the Alien Ant Farm album.
You're gonna be sickened by this. I'm pretty sure I got the demos, because when that was going on, I was really into it, and I'm kind of like, so where are we at? Are they recording the songs? And he was giving, and so I had some of the before they were mastered and stuff like that, and like, yeah. So okay, anyway, you asked me a question a long time ago. We got sidetracked, but that was how I came to do the Warehouse, because when Tim started, I mean, Warehouse is great, but when you're, they're touring the world, they're on TRL. I mean, I do that too. I mean, like, they're on Saturday Night Live and stuff like that, and yeah. So
no fault to Tim.
Yeah, well, I mean,
luckily he had Tim.
Yeah,
and Tim.
So understandably, he started devoting less and less time to the Warehouse, and I just kept bugging him, because they were on two fronts. I mean, I'd be like, what's POD doing? And then on the other, like, well, what's going on with the Warehouse? And finally, I remember I sent him an email and said, I think I said, for the sake of the Warehouse, let me know what's going on or something. And then he was like, do you want to take it over? And I was like, yup.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those like complete life decisions that I didn't even think about. I was like, yep, I do. What do we need to do here?
Right.
And so that was that. And I started doing the Warehouse.
And then who would have thought? When was your last show? 2008?
I don't even remember which was officially my last show, because because the guy that I handed it off to, like, he'd been on staff, so like he was kind of like, when I was getting out of it, he was kind of running stuff. Like, I'd be like, I don't want to come out tonight, and then I got it, and he'd take care of it. So I don't remember exactly what was the official last, but I mean, there were two things. I mean, one, the Me Without You thing, which, and I want to tell everybody, because everybody keeps asking me about it, and we may or may not have shirts reflecting the show.
We should have shirts reflecting the show. They're made. All they have to do is ship.
Well, everybody keeps, and I guess I'd probably be the same way, but everybody, here's how it plays out. It's like, they'll be like, something will be said about the Warehouse. Oh, I used to do the Warehouse. Oh, remember the Me Without You show? Like, that's how it always, I'm like, we had like 200 other shows.
Yeah, but it only takes one show.
Well, that one, and I mean, there was I know this is going to sound dramatic, but I mean, there was the personal cost of that. I mean, it was with no hyperbole at all. I mean, that was, with the exception of people dying in my life, that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, was that night at the thing. So it was stressful to get through, and it was upsetting, and I felt like a failure and all this kind of stuff. But really, I think what was playing out, like, in very dramatic,
Yes.
very dramatic fashion was we always wanted. I mean, it was really kind of funny because we kind of had a team mentality going into this. Like I said, like when POD had, they were wearing the shirt, they were getting notice for the other bands, and they would take, when they were touring these big things, they would always take our bands with them.
Right.
And we really had this mentality of like, other people ought to hear this. Like, this shouldn't be. This is too good just for our group, our little group at the warehouse. So we always wanted. Excuse me. We always wanted to be in the general market. Wanted to play at Kane's Ballroom. Wanted to all this stuff, and we eventually got that. But I think it kind of created. We were a victim of our own success because I think that it started like. I hate to say safety because Under Oath would make fun of me, I guess. But like, you lost the safety that went along with that because all of a sudden you've got, a lot of general market bands that don't share the same. In the case of Make Believe, are mad about it, and it just started becoming so it was like, I think the way the warehouse existed, I don't think there's any way that it could exist like that anymore. So what you saw play out, honestly, I mean, I think I knew in my heart that the time had come before, but it's kind of weird because when something means so much and you've devoted so much loss and time and blood, sweat, and tears and everything else to just feel like you get that post-it note from God that's like, hey, don't do this anymore. I'm kind of like, I was like, well, I must have misinterpreted that. Like, surely that's not what that means. But I thought for quite some time that like, this is, I mean, there were signs, that like, I don't know, or the same thing in a different sense. Like POD played with, and this would have been around the same time that this happened, played with, it was after they were too big for the warehouse, played at the Canes with a band called Head PE, and they were awful. I mean, they were, they were antagonistic, to say the least. And there was like church bands out, and stuff, and they were rightfully so. They were like, I brought my kids to this, and this guy's, I'll tell you about it later. It was pretty, he was creative with his insults.
The same thing happened in Dallas with me one time. I was in a band that we were playing like we got a 20-minute set, and it was for the AP tour. And
hey, that's cool though.
Family Force 5 was playing.
Oh yeah.
But the headliner was 303.
Okay.
Rap band from Boulder or whatever. Family Force 5 was the only Christian band on the whole show. And I remember pulling up to the House of Blues in Dallas, and I saw church vans parked underneath the overpass.
What could go wrong?
Here we go. So I talked to a few of my other friends. One of them was on staff at a church that I was in the band with or whatever. I was like, what are you? He's like, they'll figure it out, I'm sure. And I just remember, like, if I see somebody that looks like a youth pastor, I'm going to be like, you've got to. Because what happened was 89.7, that was the big rock station down there, put out there, Family Force 5 is coming to town. Didn't check anything else.
That was a monkey wrench in it too, because like that was what was. I could understand why they would have a problem, because like at the time, we had established ourselves as like, this is a place that you can take it'll be okay,
right.
And like, so they were doing things on that assumption, and then they come into Head PE and Make Believe, and you know what I mean, and like,
right.
So it just, I just feel like it was kind of over, at that point. But so that happened, and it just took all the wind out of my sails. I mean, I was like, I don't want to do this. I mean, it's not worth it. Like in the case of Make Believe, I mean, it was, newspapers covered it and stuff, and like it got dragged through the mud, a lot.
And that's going to be the case. I mean,
well, and so then after that, I moved on, and Mike took it over, and he calls me at one point, and he's like, hey man, the fire marshal wants to come, which again is probably the second, like they came the first time when they toured, then they came at the very end.
Yeah.
But he's like, man, the fire marshal wants to look at the place. And I didn't even know what the codes were, but I was kind of like, I'm pretty sure we're probably not up to code. So, I mean, I didn't even know enough to know what the problem was. And so go in and meet with them. And it was kind of funny because I since that time I've met the fire and like him. I mean, he's a friend of mine now, but I didn't know him at the time.
Yeah.
And so we're like walking, and of course he's asking the obvious questions. He's like, "So you guys have shows in it? Like, how long you been doing it? How many?" You know, and you know, we're telling him. And so after about 20 minutes of that, he was like, "You guys got to have a sprinkler system in here." And I was like, "Are you insane? This is like it's an industrial warehouse. Like we can't do that." And he was like, "Well, you can't have shows until you do it." And like, you know, I looked at Mike and I was like, "I'm not even. This is your thing." So, and he was like, "Well, I guess we're closed." And so they were, but in fairness, they were able to some way. They got somebody to donate it or something. So it's kind of funny. Like there's 5 warehouses over there. One of them apparently is real safe, and the other ones
one of them has a sprinkler system.
Yeah, and so they put in the sprinklers and stuff. And I think we had to redo the electricity. I mean, something. It was fairly expensive endeavors, but like that was kind of the end of it because it was kind of like, well, you know, things aren't working, and plus the fact too that like the bands that would have been our bread and butter weren't coming. I mean, famously, we never had Frozen Seems Forever, never had Juliana. I mean, bands that were getting really big at the time, like they were beyond what we could get. Whereas it used to be that, like, you know, we would be who those bands would go to. We famously, Tim Tabor, who's a friend and cool, love him, from the Prayer Chain. He told me that back in those days, in the days where Prayer Chain was going and all that stuff, you know, MXPX and all that was so big. There's really 3 places he was like, there was the warehouse, the door, which you said, and someplace in California that I don't remember the name of, but and he was like, so you'd have those 3 solid, awesome shows, and then you try and fill in the middle with like church basements and, you know, backyards and stuff.
And that was the thing, like, you know, being in a Christian band and being on that side of things, not being on the show side of it, you kind of got to experience that where you would and I knew a lot of bands that tried to, because at least with churches you knew you had a place to stay and you were going to get fed. And so there were bands that would try to do a 50-50 split. Like if they're playing 5 days a week, they want 2 or 3 of their shows at a church because churches take care of musicians.
Well, and that was funny too. I mean, that was another thing that became difficult about it because whenever the warehouse started, like they wouldn't book a band, you know, like Mind Rage or something. I mean, they wouldn't do that. And like, but I think through what we were doing, like now, I mean, like not just counting. I mean, there for a while it was like you had us, and then there was a place called 180 in Tulsa that like, and so there was a couple in Tulsa that did it. But I mean, now, I mean, in Bartlesville alone, I mean, there's probably 15 churches that would put that stuff on. And frankly, and I don't want to really get into the dirt of the industry, but like that, I always felt like that was another problem in itself because like you had Christian market bands. And it was funny because a band like POD, they really probably shouldn't have been in Christian market to begin with. I mean, they should have been a general market band. But it was really kind of funny because there was a whole circuit of churches that were all soft ticket, like they all had budgets. So like it wasn't like when a band would come to me and like we do a show at the warehouse, I'm like, well, okay, what do I think you're going to draw and how much could I pay you and stuff like this. These churches, I mean, they just be like, how much does it cost to bring in whatever? And they're like $8,000. I'm not going to name names, but I mean, there were hundreds of bands that like had no business making the money that they were making because they were just playing churches, and like, you know, the churches didn't know any better, and they would they just count it as an outreach, like it's an expense. And so well, that came into it too, because once it kind of was attacking us on 2 fronts. It was like you had the Brady and the Canes and now like the Vanguard and places like that, First Shop that you know, you will do shows that we would do. And so you had that on that end. And then on the other end, you had these churches that would pay them and be able to take care of them better. I mean, whatever it is, they would do it better than us. I mean, their food would be better. And so, well, but it was kind of a vicious circle. And I think we'll probably, as the podcast goes on, we'll probably talk about this more with some other bands. But like that became a vicious circle because a band could make a fair amount of money playing the Christian stuff, but you weren't going to get anywhere. Like there was a definite I mean, there was only so big you could be in the Christian stuff, so you would have to cross over. But then you weren't able to do that whenever, you know what I mean? Like you're like my whole roster is a bunch of churches, and like, you know, the real people, the labels that are wanting to actually make money off of it, they're like, well, so what's your hard ticket? And I actually, and again, I'm not gonna name names, but like I knew bands that were pulling, no joke, like 800 in the Christian or in the church thing, and then they'd go to, you know, we're gonna cross over, and then they'd book them a bunch of clubs, and they'd spend 2 weeks playing for 10 kids, you know, and like, but
it was a rough time. I mean, and I know bands like that because I put on a church festival, and I saw some of that as well. It's kind of like, no.
Yeah.
And you can't blame people for trying, but it's kind of like, you know, that they're not in they're in a position to ask you that as a church, but they would never be in that position to go to Cane's and say,
"Oh yeah,
what I'm expecting." So,
which I also thought was kind of funny too. That like, and there was also a little bit weird on the other end of that, because like, in order to a Christian band would have to take a bite to do that. Like well, we're going to do a complete club tour. Yeah. Like most of them, unless you're POD or something like that, like most of them would have to take a massive step down. I mean, they would go from like, you know, we're in a tour bus with blah blah. We're getting we're getting catering and rider and stuff. They would be back to like $200 flat. Show up at load ins at 7, kind of thing, and you know, most of them really just didn't know, you know, really honestly didn't have the wherewithal to stick with it.
Well, I think the one band that I remember doing something similar to that, and it was like 2007 or 2008, and it was like they were in the most obscure thing, I think, was the David Crowder Band.
Oh, yeah.
Known for praise and worship strictly, and then they did a tour that was all club tour.
Yeah.
And they played Cane's, they played a few places, I know they played in Dallas and stuff like that, and they were all club tour. And I'm like, that's probably one of the only bands that you can find that can do things like that.
Well, and legit too. Right. I mean, like, what's funny about it is I read this one time, and ironically, I can't remember the name of the band. I used to get, Tooth and Nail was wonderful. I mean, I used to get like just boxes. I mean, it was like Christmas time, like every month.
Yeah.
You know, like every new Tooth and Nail release. And like, so, I mean, no joke, I'd get like 20 CDs at once. And God, I just lost my train of thought. Why was I saying that? We were talking about
bands and markets doing club tours.
Oh yeah, okay. So and they all would come with like the, you know, the bio and the information sheet, and you know, like Element 101, and here it would tell you about them. Right. And one of the hardcore bands, and it's ironic that I can't remember who it was. I mean, that's what's funny about it. But I remember it said in their bio, it said, in a genre where bands are more judged on their ability to emulate the standard than for actually breaking ground. And I thought, man, that is really, that's absolutely right. But it, you know, ironically, I don't even remember what band it was, but they were right about that. But like, you know, a lot of the bands, I think that's what they were doing. I mean, they weren't really, like a band like Under Oath. I mean, clearly, like they did their own. I mean, they even got their own genre. Yeah. You know, and like most of these bands weren't doing that. And I don't want to dog them, but I mean, they were like, it was like, I don't know, if Limp Bizkit did something, it's like you'd have 15 Limp Bizkit bands.
They were basically just trying to get a Christian alternative to what. I remember, because, you know, being a preacher's kid, my parents' church got this, and I can't even remember what brand it was that put out this youth ministry stuff, and they would send you like a DVD with music videos, and you get a CD.
Oh yeah. No, I know exactly. Oh God, shoot. And when I was managing Morning September, I totally remember that, and you would pay to get on that. Like the label would pay to, and I remember they came back and you know, Morning September was a fairly preachy band, right? And like, so I mean, they definitely weren't like, you know, offended by like spiritual questions or anything like that. But you had to do like a questionnaire, and it was like, what's a scriptural reference to this? You would submit whatever
Yeah.
song it was, and it was like, what's a spiritual angle, and here, what's some ideas for a lesson plan? Like they're gonna,
Right.
like you're supposed to like teach your Sunday school lesson on the Morning September record or something.
Well, and so we got that. We would always get these things. It's always like Kids in the Way. I think Sub 7, we got some of their stuff in it. But
well, honestly, bands like that, they would really thrive from that. Like I remember because we were all counting it. God, I can't think of the name of it, but
I actually found some back at my work the other day. Looking for an XLR cable.
That was probably half of the bands from the warehouse. But like, I don't know. It was funny. We were really counting on it. Like, we're gonna get a bump in sales.
Yeah.
And
Well, I always thought it was
really
funny because like they had this poster, and it's like a wall poster, and it would have a list of, if you're into this band, this band would
recommended if you like.
Yeah. And then it'd be like secular bands with a Christian meaning, and I'm like, how does Jimmy Eat World?
Oh, I know.
And it's like,
and what's really
bands.
What's really funny about that is a band like Jimmy Eat World, and I don't know what but like they're definitely super positive, and I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that not just a Christian, but any human being would find, really positive and cool about what they're doing. So it's kind of weird I always think it's weird that like in that scene, everything that wasn't Christian was perceived as bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you got to stay away from this John Denver.
Yeah.
He looks evil to me.
Well, my favorite one was I sent my dad a bunch of my dad being the good old Southern Baptist preacher that he is. I sent him some of Black Sabbath's Master of Reality album, different songs and stuff like that, and they're kind of attributed to being the first Christian metal song.
Well, Doug Van Pelt told me one time, and he probably wrote this, that he felt like, and it's the HM guy. He told me he felt like Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden was the first official Christian metal. Like, because he was like the themes on it and all that, and I always was like, hey, I can live with that.
It's like, in 1971, they're releasing these albums, and people were like, well, maybe they did it just to try to get rid of the satanic angle that people. I don't know. It's a big thing. But we've been on here for an hour and 8 minutes.
That's way too much to listen to me.
Hey, it's fine. It was a great eye-opening experience. So we've got every Wednesday. We're hoping to release new content every Wednesday at 9.
We got some good stuff lined up too.
Yes, we do. And so hopefully going into the new year, we're going to even have some different cooler things as well that we're doing, just besides rehashing the good old days. Sitting on the, we need to film this from the Cracker Barrel.
I think I told you this was kind of ironic. I heard this the other day, and I repeated it like 10 times. And it was somebody from Furnace Fest that was talking about releasing new material. And they used the term. They said you want to be a factory and not a warehouse, like warehouse. And he was like, you want to be producing stuff and not just storing old things. And I thought that actually makes a lot of sense. I was like, it's an unfortunate choice of words that it's the warehouse.
Right. So we are trying to be more of a factory instead of a warehouse.
Ironically, even though we're the warehouse.
Talking about the warehouse. So yes, look for us. We're going to be on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Facebook, IGTV, everywhere you can watch it, and you can watch us on Spotify too. That's pretty cool. Like
post office wall will be our mugshots probably.
Yes, and I mean we're joining the likes of Joe Rogan. We're going to be Christian Joe Rogan.
Actually, I got asked the other day to be on the Allied Arts and Humanities thing.
Oh yeah,
which was funny because we were on it when we were at the warehouse. We were a member of that, and we're just not. And I was kind of like, yeah, we did that at one time. You sure you want us to be on?
Oh man! Well, thank you for coming over the week of Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah.
Filming this out.
Yeah.
Things will get better, guys. Trust me. We'll get.
And in the very near future, we have Living Sacrifice, and it's gonna be good because it's not. Anybody knows Living Sacrifice history knows that there's been a lot of people kind of cycle through that band, and we're doing old and new at the same time. We're gonna do DJ and Lance.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, so DJ was the former singer, Lance is the former and current drummer.
And then who else?
Luxury, which is more, I tell you right now, is going to be more interesting than you think. When I just said Luxury, probably half of you were like, what? they've got a very, very, very interesting, good story. So we're doing luxury spoken. There's a new like worshipy band on Tooth and Nail called Kids.
Okay.
We're gonna do them. Yeah,
And
I think that's what I got.
We're using the term "do" because apparently, if you use the word "shoot," you can get.
It could be problematic.
Yeah. So one of the guys that took pictures for Reformation Fest sent me a message that said, "Hey, sorry, I'm in Facebook jail because he had made a post of a band that was like, I can't wait to get back out and shoot you guys again."
Oh.
And I guess the Facebook meta algorithm read that and was like, nope, we're done.
Not playing, no tolerance.
So he got 8 days in Facebook jail.
8 days?
Yeah, 8 days. So he should be out by now. He sent me some other pictures. They're really, really good. So, but follow us everywhere. Warehouse Pod. We should have a website up soon with that.
We probably will have some merch at some point.
We have some ugly Christmas sweaters.
I don't know about the make-believe one, but we'll probably have some merch.
I think if we do that, that could be one of those things where we maybe could, like, bring that whole thing in.
We used to have keychains and stickers.
Well, we're going big.
And literally, the stupidest thing I ever did at the warehouse was with those keychains. I'm still to this day, I'm like, that was one of the dumbest moves I've ever done ever.
Was getting keychains?
No, we had these like they were done like those 50s one, like the little fob plastic thing, and I got glow in the dark, which is really cool. And we had, we used black lights, and so if you hit something that's glow in the dark with black light, it like charges it up. Like if you've ever like those things you get in a cereal box that like glow in the dark, like if you put that under black light, it really, really glows. And I knew this, and so I was like, we'd throw them out. Like I'd bring them out at the show and be like, hey, we got some stickers, and throw stickers, and we got some, throw them out. Yeah. And so I had a whole bunch of them. I had them hanging on my fingers. It was like, we got all these, and kids were, who wants one? And they were like cheering.
Free stuff.
And so they turned the lights out and hit it with the lights, and it looked cool. In fairness, that part looked cool because it was like completely dark, and there's all these little glowy things. They freaking threw them. Didn't even think that like these guys can't see each other, and so literally like 10 or 12 of these things go flittering into the crowd, and I mean everybody there bonk. Heads are cracked and stuff, and I realized this like right. I'm like, oh my god, and like these kids, getting hurt, and some kid got a bloody lip and stuff, and I'm like, that was a dumb maneuver.
Right. Look at you being the
some lucky fans have got some.
If you have a warehouse keychain or sticker, please post it on our socials.
So note to self: leave the lights on.
Leave the lights on when we're throwing them. Well, guys, thanks for joining us for this episode. I'm Chase Almy. I'm the co-host, producer guy usually, but today it was great talking to Tim. Yeah, hopefully it went good. It went probably well. No one's listening now after an hour. Hey, I have faith in this. We'll see you guys next time.